We're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 29 today. And so last week we went through the blessings and the curses, and we talked about all the things that will happen in the promised land when the Israelites become unfaithful. So starting in chapter 29. These are the terms of the covenant the Lord commanded Moses to make with the Israelites while they were in the land of Moab, in addition to the covenant he had made with them at Mount Sinai. Moses summoned all the Israelites and said to them, "You have seen with your own eyes everything the Lord did in the land of Egypt to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to his whole country, all the great tests of strength, the miraculous signs and amazing wonders. But to this day the Lord has not given you minds that understand, nor eyes that see, nor ears that hear. For 40 years I led you through the wilderness, yet your clothes and sandals did not wear out. You ate no bread and drank no wine or other alcoholic drink, but he provided you so that you would know that the Lord is your God." So Moses is reviewing their journey through the wilderness and saying, look, the Lord's been good to you for 40 years. The Lord has taken care of you. And have you ever had a pair of shoes that lasted for 40 years? I certainly have not. And God is showing goodness and mercy. And so even though I haven't had a pair of shoes that lasted 40 years, I've had a car I bought for $400. It had 320,000 miles on it when I bought it. And I bought it because my husband had a job where he had to commute, and his car, the alternator caught fire, and it wrecked the engine, and we didn't have enough money to replace it with a good car. So we bought the car we could, and we drove that car for a year, and we put more than a year because we put about 50,000 miles on that car, and it finally died with 375,000 miles on it. And it died right after both of us had started new jobs with much better income and could finally afford a better car. It was one of those things where God made it last as long as it needed to. Thanks be to God. And this is exactly what God is doing here in Israel. Verse 7, when we came here, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan came out to fight against us, but we defeated them. We took their land and gave it to the tribes of Reuben and Gad and to the half tribe of Manasseh as their grant of land. Therefore, obey the terms of this covenant so that you will prosper in everything you do. All of you, tribal leaders, elders, officers, all the men of Israel are standing today in the presence of the Lord your God. Your little ones and your wives are with you, as well as the foreigners living among you who chop your wood and carry your water. You are standing here today to enter into the covenant of the Lord your God. The Lord is making this covenant, including the curses. By entering into the covenant today, I lost my spot. By entering into the covenant today, God will establish you as his people and confirm that he is your God, just as he promised you, as he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Good morning, Maureen. We are in chapter 29 today.
I had a little trouble getting into you.
I'm so sorry. It
okay.
happened.
I'll be with you, and then I'm going to cut short because I'm running over to see you at 12:15.
Perfect. No problem. I'm glad you're here today, and
Thank you.
we haven't gotten but 9 verses in, so you didn't miss much.
Okay.
So yes, so we are in chapter 29, and we're talking about God's covenant being the thing that makes the relationship work.
Mm-hmm.
And so these relationships are both and. They go both ways. There's blessings and there's curses, And covenant is more than relationship. It's also responsibility. It's an effort to maintain good relationships. As those of us who are married know, there are seasons where those vows come into play, better for worse, richer for poor, sickness and health. And what God is asking is for a vow of faithfulness from the people. Verse 14, but you are not the only ones with whom I'm making this covenant with its curses. I am making this covenant both with you who stand here today in the presence of the Lord our God, and also with the future generations who are not standing here today. So this idea that God's promises carry forward, and we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to teach the next generation about the covenant that they have been born into. And for those of us Gentiles, the relationship that we are invited into because of Jesus. Verse 16, you remember how we lived in the land of Egypt and how we traveled through the lands of enemy nations as we left. You have seen their detestable practices and their idols made of wood, stone, silver, and gold. I am making this covenant with you so that no one among you, no man, woman, clan, or tribe will turn away from the Lord our God to worship these gods of other nations, and so that no root among you bears bitter and poisonous fruit. So again, God is explaining that these are not arbitrary rules, but are made because of the dire consequences of idolatry. Verse 19, those who hear the warnings of this curse should not congratulate themselves, thinking I am safe, even though I am following the desires of my own stubborn heart. This would lead to utter ruin. The Lord will never pardon such people. Instead, his anger and jealousy will burn against us and them. All the curses written in this book will come down on them, and the Lord will erase their names from under heaven. The Lord will separate them from all the tribes of Israel, to pour out on them all the curses of the covenant recorded in this book of instruction. So God is saying, just because you have the right family tree doesn't mean that you have a free pass to do whatever you want. And I would extend this farther and forward today to perhaps the more Baptist-leaning Christian who will say, but I'm saved. Yes. But that's not a free pass to continue on sinning, blaspheming, and drawing down the ire of the Lord. Salvation and grace is not a cheap thing to just, well, I know God doesn't like it when I beat my wife, but I say I'm sorry after every time, so it's okay. Or replace that with any ongoing sin. There are consequences in relationships to ongoing sin. Now, does that mean that an addict who continues to relapse cannot be saved? No. Notice the consequences are not stating eternal damnation. It's saying that your life isn't going to be abundantly blessed and you're not going to enjoy all the fruits of a good and healthy relationship because you did these other things here. And so, don't get cocky is essentially what God is saying here in the modern vernacular. Verse 22, then the generations to come, both your own descendants and the foreigners who come from distant lands, will see the devastation of the land and the diseases of the Lord will inflict upon it. They will exclaim, the whole land is devastated by sulfur and salt. It is a wasteland with nothing planted and nothing growing, not even a blade of grass. It is like the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah in his intense anger. And all the surrounding nations will ask, why has the Lord done this to this land? Why was he so angry? And the answer will be, this happened because the people of the land abandoned the covenant that the Lord, their God of their ancestors, made with them when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Instead, they turned away to serve and worship gods they had not known before, gods that were not from the Lord. This is why the Lord's anger has burned against this land, burning down on it every curse recorded in this book. In great anger and fury, the Lord uprooted his people from their land and banished them to another land where they still live today. There is a modern movement that conflates the promises of the Promised Land and Israel with American Christianity. So there are people who will take these verses and they will say, well, because America is not following the living word of God and not being humble and bowing and being penitent before God, that's why everything is going wrong in our land. Well, remember, Deuteronomy was written for a people and a place and a time. And also, in the New Testament, when we encounter how Christianity begins through the Jesus movement, it talks about faithful remnants and being faithful in going out into the world and all the nations and making disciples. And so rather than the focus being on having this pure, perfect kingdom, which will draw others to God, which is sort of this Old Testament model, which I think God was gracious enough to bring us through to help us realize we are never going to do it ourselves, even with the ultimate guidebook of how to have the great place with the right leadership and the right relationship with God. So that when Jesus finally did come, we would accept the sacrifice made for us. But my opinion would be that this is not something we should just literally read over onto America or wherever we are to say, well, this is why things are going wrong, is because this nation is not humbled before the Lord. Because again, in the New Testament modality, it is our obligation to live as faithful people who go forth with the power of the Holy Spirit to work towards the sanctification of all. So rather than blaming all these other people for not living a godly life, well, what are we doing about it? And why have we not invited them in? So, verse 29, the Lord our God has secrets known to no one. We are not accountable for them. I love this verse because I tend to be a person who very much takes personal accountability seriously. I am not accountable for the things I don't know about from God, the things that God wants or doesn't want, or the things that I don't know about. That is fine. We're not accountable for what we do not know. But we and our children are accountable forever for all that God has revealed to us, so that we may obey all the terms of these instructions. So I have a really long set of notes on this passage because it means so much to me that we are not held to an impossibly high standard. The Lord reveals enough of himself through his word and through Christ to attain salvation is not to understand how God or even the whole world works. So chapter 30 issues a call to return to the Lord. So even in the midst of getting ready to enter into the promised land and these blessings and these curses, there is already an assumption that the people are going to wander away. It was known that this people who had been stiff-necked and disobedient before, they're going to do it again. Aren't we all? So in the future, when you experience all these blessings and curses I have listed for you, and when you are living among the nations to which the Lord your God has exiled you, Take to heart all these instructions. If at any time you and your children return to the Lord your God, and if you will obey with all your heart and all your soul all the commands I've given you today, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes. He will have mercy on you and gather you back from all the nations from which he has scattered you, even though you are banished to the ends of the earth. The Lord your God will gather you from there and bring you back again. The Lord your God will return to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will possess that land again. Then he will make you even more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. So we are to take God's instructions to heart. And there is always the opportunity to return to the Lord and obey commands. And God will take it from there. Oops, sorry, there's a fly in here. God will be the action doer. God will be the restorer and the resurrector. It is not for us to take it upon ourselves to work out our own salvation or our own restoration of a sacred promised land. Verse 6, the Lord your God will change your heart and the hearts of all your descendants, so that you will love him with all your heart and soul, so you may live. The Lord your God will inflict all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you and persecute you. Then you will again obey the Lord and keep all his commands I am giving you today. The Lord your God will make you successful in everything you do. He will give you many children and numerous livestock, and he will cause your fields to produce abundant harvests. For the Lord will again delight in being good to you as he was to your ancestors. The Lord your God will delight in you if you obey his voice and keep the commands and decrees written in this book of instruction, and if you turn to the Lord your God with all your heart and soul. So God not only takes over restoration when we return in our hearts and obey his commands, God will go even further by taking on the action of changing our hearts. It is that change that God initiates that enables us to love him with all our hearts. And then we are capable of receiving the abundant blessing of restoration. This command I am giving you today is not too difficult for you and is not beyond your reach. I've counseled many people who were stuck in a season of temptation or a season of despair or despondency, who have basically given up and saying, well, this is who I am. Or this is, what I've done is too terrible and I'll never be able to have my life back again. And therefore, what's the point? God says here, it isn't too difficult and it isn't too late to change. And that is the beauty of the grace that we believe in, that even a deathbed confession will result in attainment of the glory of heaven. It's never too late. That being said, certainly there are still consequences to our actions here on earth, and those often cannot be circumvented. And so I've had, I will say, the privilege of walking with people as they chose to go confess not only to me, but also to law enforcement, the things that they needed to make right. And they did have a season of accountability, but they came through that with a changed heart and a restored life on the other side. It's not too late, and it's never beyond our reach. It is not kept in heaven, so distant that you must ask, who will go up to heaven and bring it down here so we can hear it and obey? It is not kept beyond the sea, so far away that you may ask, who will cross the sea to bring it to us so we can hear it and obey? No, the message is very close at hand. It is on your lips and in your heart so that you can obey it. One of the big distinctions between Christianity and some other world religions is that the God that we worship is not this far, high off, somehow unknowable God. It's not this sacred mystery that only a very, very select few with just the right prayer practices and meditation and yoga or whatever practice you have can attain to. It is close at hand, and it's on our lips and in our hearts. It's given to us right here in what we're doing today in our Bible study. Verse 15, now listen, today I am giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster. For I command you this day to love the Lord your God and keep his commands, decrees, and regulations by walking in his ways. If you do this, you will live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you and the land you are about to enter and occupy. But if your heart turns away and you refuse to listen, and if you are drawn away to serve and worship other gods, then I warn you now that you will certainly be destroyed. You will not live a long, good life in the land you are crossing the Jordan to occupy. Today I've given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and on earth to witness to the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life so that you and your descendants might live. It's interesting, we were having a discussion before Bible study got started about choosing life and about abortion and the sanctity of life. And this phrase, choose life, you'll often find on bumper stickers or other pro-life advocacy. It goes far beyond simply choosing to give birth to a child. What God is referencing here is choosing faithfulness to all the commands, which include caring for the widows and the orphans and the children among them, and to care for the poor and the Jubilee year and all of those things. And so choosing life goes far beyond simply advocating for an end to abortion. And so I share that just to say, oftentimes our politics are very polarized over the issue of abortion. And I want to encourage people to broaden the conversation to talk about all of the ways in which we can protect human life. And certainly the ways that we can avoid condemning those in extremely vulnerable situations who are facing an impossible choice. And how can we as a society improve the world so that that choice is no longer faced. Verse 20, you can make this choice by loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and committing yourself firmly to him. This is the key to your life. And if you love and obey the Lord, you will live long in the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So the key to life is to love the Lord. And I think that this is one of those things that holds true not only for the Israelites, but for us as well. And if we can stay rooted in our love of the Lord above all else, walking in difficult seasons becomes much easier. And so now we get to the point where Moses has wrapped up his final sermon, and the time has come to hand over leadership to another. Chapter 31. When Moses had finished giving these instructions to all the people of Israel, he said, I am now 120 years old, and I am no longer able to lead you. The Lord has told me you will not cross the Jordan River, but the Lord your God himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy the nations living there, and you will take possession of their land. Joshua will lead you across the river, just as the Lord promised. The Lord will destroy the nations living in the land, just as he destroyed Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites. The Lord will hand over to you all the people who live there, and you must deal with them as I have commanded you. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, and do not panic before them. For the Lord your God will personally go ahead of you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. So Moses at 120 needs to retire. He's not actually really ready to retire, as we've read in other parts of Deuteronomy where he begs God to reconsider and allow him to enter into the promised land. And remember, Moses still to this day blames the other Israelites for his own choosing to whack the rock and say, "You're such a disobedient people, must I do this for you?" rather than trusting in God. This is how we can be pretty darn sure that this was authored by Moses, because he glosses over those little less than delightful parts and he gives this instruction. For the modern people among us who are thinking 120, not many people live that old and they're usually pretty decrepit. And how is this guy wandering through the desert at that age? Well, there are people who do live that long. Also, the Hebrew calendar and months and years are not always lined up with our Western calendar. Also, numbers in the Jewish and Hebrew culture of that time were less about literal accounting and often held spiritual or moral significance. And so 120 years old, you don't have to take it literally. They likely didn't. And it's more of, I am the oldest and the wisest, and I have been around a really long time, and now it's time for me to depart. So verse 7, then Moses called for Joshua, and as all Israel watched, he said to him, "Be strong and courageous." I love this verse. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord God goes ahead of us. I have a sign in my office, actually, that says, "Be strong and courageous, for God goes ahead of you." There are times and seasons of life when all of us will be called to do hard things, but God goes ahead and makes a way if we're really being called to do that. Sometimes the road is hard and slogging because we're going in the wrong direction. Sometimes the road is hard and sloggy because it's hard to do the right thing. Verse 9. So Moses wrote this entire body of instruction in a book and gave it to the priests who carried the ark of the Lord's covenant and to the elders of Israel. Then Moses gave them this command. At the end of every 7th year, the year of release, during the festival of shelters, you must read the book of instruction to all people of Israel when they assemble before the Lord your God at the place he chooses. Call them all together, men, women, children, and the foreigners living among your town, so that they may hear this book of instruction and learn to fear the Lord your God carefully and obey all the terms of this instruction. Do this so that your children who have not known these instructions will hear them and will learn to fear the Lord your God. Do this as long as you live in the land you are crossing the Jordan to occupy. So again, they don't have printing presses. They don't have a lot of books. These words were written on a scroll. And so Deuteronomy in my Bible takes up about this much. These many pages. And these would have been on several scrolls. And these would have been written over a festival of shelters that took place over 2 weeks. So just like you and I have been reading this a chunk at a time every Wednesday, they would have read a chunk of it every day for that festival. And that way, everyone would hear it and learn it over the course of their life. And it's happening every 7 years. So you'd hear it at least 3 or 4 times in your lifetime. And that way, in living memory, people could transmit it to their children. This is not, they had to read the whole Bible or even all that Moses had written from Genesis to Deuteronomy. He's specifying this book of instruction, which is Deuteronomy. Verse 14, then the Lord said to Moses, the time has come for you to die. What a cheery verse, right? But I think for many of us, I personally would like to know when my time is approaching so that I can make preparations and plans. And Moses gets an opportunity to say goodbye. Call Joshua and present yourself at the tabernacle so that I may commission him there. So Moses and Joshua went and presented themselves at the tabernacle, and the Lord appeared to them in a pillar of cloud that stood at the entrance to the sacred tent. The Lord said to Moses, "You are about to die and join your ancestors. After you are gone, these people will begin to worship foreign gods, the gods of the land where they are going. They will abandon me and break my covenant that I have made with them. Then my anger will blaze forth against them. I will abandon them, hiding my face from them, and they will be devoured. Terrible trouble will come down on them. And on that day they will say, 'These disasters have come down on us because God is no longer among us.' At that time I will hide my face from them on account of all the evil they commit by worshiping other gods. So write down the words of this song and teach it to the people of Israel. Help them learn it, so that it may serve as a witness for me against them. For I will bring them into the land I swore to give to their ancestors, a land flowing with milk and honey. There they will become prosperous, eat all the food they want, and become fat. But they will begin to worship other gods. They will despise me and break my covenant. And when great disasters come down on them, this song will stand as evidence against them, for it will never be forgotten by their descendants. I know the intentions of this people even now, before they've entered the land I swore to give to them." So God is doing a couple of things here that's important to note. Number one is the transmission of leadership. Moses is to call Joshua, and they're to go to the temple together and to pass on the mantle of responsibility for this community. My goal is not to die at the altar. For every priest and church, there is a season in which leadership must transmit and go to the next generation to say that, for the work to carry on, we have to be intentional about transmitting it to the next to take care of. And I also find it both incredibly sad and hard that in the midst of this transmission of leadership, both Moses and Joshua are essentially hearing that in our modern terms, you failed. You failed at leadership before you ever get started, because these people are going to fall away. And so if you define your leadership of a church by the ability of the followers to remain faithful to God, you will find yourself rapidly disappointed. Moses hears at the end that although they are attaining the promised land, it won't last forever. And Joshua hears this as well. And my hope is that God is doing this with the intention of giving both of them perspective of what is important in leadership. So that very day, Moses wrote down the words of a song and taught it to the Israelites. Then the Lord commissioned Joshua, son of Nun, with these words: "Be strong and courageous, for you must bring the people of Israel into the land I swore to give to them. I will be with you." The Lord commissions Joshua with the same: be strong and courageous. It won't be easy. The people won't always be grateful, but I will be with you. When Moses had finished writing the entire body of instruction in a book, he gave this command to the Levites who carried the Ark of the Lord's covenant: take this book of instruction and place it beside the Lord's covenant. Place it beside the Ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, so that it remain there as a witness against the people of Israel. For I know how rebellious and stubborn you are. Even now, while I am still alive and I'm here with you, you have rebelled against the Lord. how much more rebellious will you be after my death? Now summon all the elders and officials of your tribe so that I can speak to them directly and call heaven and earth to witness against them. I know that after my death, you will become utterly corrupt and will turn from the way I've commanded you to follow. In the days to come, disaster will come down on you, for you will do what is evil in the Lord's sight, making him very angry with your actions. So God commanded this song to be written, and this song is a really long song. It goes on for 44 verses, but it's also beautiful. So Moses recited the entire song publicly to the assembly of Israel. Listen, O heavens, and I will speak. Hear, O earth, the words that I say. Let my teaching fall on you like rain. Let my speech settle like dew. Let my words fall like rain on tender grass, like gentle showers on young plants. I will proclaim the name of the Lord. How glorious is our God. He is the rock. His deeds are perfect. Everything he does is just and fair. He is a faithful God who does no wrong. How just and upright he is. So it talks about tender and gentleness and this idea that God's words are like rain that can nourish and replenish and refresh. Verse 5, but they have acted so corruptly towards him. When they act so perversely, are they really his children? They are a deceitful and twisted generation. Is this the way you repay the Lord, you foolish and senseless people? Isn't he your father who created you? Has he not made you and established you? Remember the days of long ago. Think about the generations past. Ask your father and he will inform you. Inquire of your elders and they will tell you. When the Most High assigned lands to the nation, when he divided up the human race, he established the boundaries of the people according to the number in his heavenly court. For the people of Israel belong to the Lord. Jacob is his special possession. He found them in a desert land, in an empty, howling wasteland. He surrounded them and watched over them. He guarded them as he would guard his own eyes, like an eagle that rouses her chicks and hovers over her young. So he spread his wings to take them up and carried them safely on his pinions. So, Raise You Up on Eagle's Wings is a favorite song for a lot of Christians. And this is part of where that comes from, this idea that God will watch over and surround you and guard you and hover over you and then raise you up. The Lord alone guided them. They followed no foreign gods. He let them ride over the highlands and feast on the crops of the fields. He nourished them with honey from the rock and olive oil from the stony ground. He fed them with yogurt from the herd and milk from the flock, together with the fat of lambs. He gave them choice rams from Bashan and goats together with the choicest wheat. You drank the finest wine made from the juice of grapes. So look, not only is the Lord good and gracious, but here's all the good that he's done for your people. So it's important here when God, in the instructions Moses gives, say, talk to your elders about what God has done. We have this bias in ourselves that looks for, what have you done for me lately, God? And we sometimes fail to look at the broader perspective of what God has done over time. But Israel soon became fat and unruly. The people grew heavy, plump, and stuffed. That might be a condemnation. Certainly, we have become a heavy, plump nation. Then they abandoned the God who had made them. They made light of the rock of their salvation. I have in here a note of cheap grace. When there is abundance and plenty for a long period of time, we begin to take it for granted that this is how it should be. This is how it always is. And of course, I deserve to have this. And I think that we should be cautious They stirred up his jealousy by worshiping foreign gods. They provoked his fury with detestable deeds. So with the Israelites, the detestable deeds they're talking about are sacrifice to other gods, particularly human sacrifice, intermarriage in a way that leads their own children astray. For us, I think also we need to focus that detestable deeds are forsaking the commands of the Lord to care for the widows and orphans and the poor, and to celebrate the year of Jubilee and make restoration to people and to have people be made whole. Then it talks about they offered sacrifices to demons, which are not God, to gods they had not known before, to new gods only recently arrived, to gods their ancestors had never feared. You neglected the rock who had fathered you. You forgot the God who had given you birth. The Lord saw this and drew back, provoked to anger by his own sons and daughters. He said, I will abandon them. Then see what becomes of them, for they are a twisted generation, children without integrity. They have roused my jealousy by worshiping things that are not God. They have provoked my anger with their useless idols. Now I will rouse their jealousy through people who are not even a people. I will provoke their anger through the foolish Gentiles. Here I am, a foolish Gentile, and probably so are you. But again, I want to take care to say that this was written both for the original hearers, but also there's wisdom in it for us of, are we worshiping things that are not God? Now, most of us don't have an idol in our house, like a tiki head or a, false image of some other foreign god, but do we make more time for our leisure? Do we make more time for our money? Are we worshiping at the altar of American capitalism? Are we, where are we valuing our time and our talent and treasure? For there our God is. So for some of us, our God can be our family. Our God can be our cars, our money, our human goods. Anything that we devote undue affection towards is a place of danger for us. For my anger blazes forth like fire and burns to the depths of the grave. It devours the earth and all its crops. It ignites the foundations of mountains. I will heap disasters upon them and shoot them down with my arrows. I will weaken them with famine, burning fever, and deadly disease. I will send the fangs of wild beasts and poisonous snakes that glide in the dust. Outside, the sword will bring death, and inside, terror will strike. Both young men and young women, both infants and the aged, I would have annihilated them, wiping out even the memory of them. But I fear the taunt of Israel's enemy, who might misunderstand and say our own power has triumphed. The Lord had nothing to do with this. So God says, I would wipe you out completely were it not for the fact that people would then assume that your God isn't real. But Israel is a senseless nation, and the people are foolish without understanding. Oh, that they were wise and could understand this. Oh, that they might know their fate. How could one person chase 1,000 of them and two people put 10,000 to flight unless the rock had sold them, unless their Lord had given them up? But the rock of our enemies is not like our rock is, even now they recognize. Their vine grows from the vine of Sodom, from the vineyards of Gomorrah. Their grapes are poison and their clusters are bitter. Their wine is the venom of serpents and the deadly poison of cobras. So visiting back to Sodom and Gomorrah, because there is a very large assumption that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah relates to homosexuality or the assault of the men who were meant to be angels. And this portion of the verse of Deuteronomy has been taken in America by some evangelical right to say that, especially the Westboro Baptist Church, that the reason our nation is suffering is because homosexuality is being promoted. In Ezekiel, when it talks about the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah, it says the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was to forsake hospitality, to hoard their goods and their wealth, and to have forsaken their duty to care for the foreigner among them. So Ezekiel writes that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was a corrupt value on wealth. I think that one might be a more accurate interpretation of our current situation in America, where our richest of rich and our poorest of poor are so very disparate. But that's my opinion. That is not me speaking as a priest saying you must share this interpretation. Verse 34, the Lord says, am I not storing up these things, sealing them away in my treasury? I will take revenge. I will pay back. In due time, their feet will slip. Their day of disaster will arrive, and their destiny will overtake them. Indeed, the Lord will give justice to his people, and he will change his mind about his servants when he sees their strength is gone and no one is left, slave or free. Then he will ask, where are their gods? The rocks they fled to for refuge. Where now are those gods who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their offerings? Let those gods arise and help you. Let them provide you with shelter. Look now, I myself am he. There is no other God but me. I am the one who kills and gives life. I am the one who wounds and heals. No one can be rescued from my powerful hand. So God is saying, look, I'm going to put you through all these trials, temptations, and what you're going to even describe as torture, so that you're going to cry out to all these gods you've been worshiping and find no help. So that you will finally realize that these gods are meaningless, and I am the only God you can turn to. Now I raise my hand to heaven and declare, as surely as I live, when I sharpen my flashing sword and begin to carry out justice, I will take revenge on my enemies and repay those who reject me. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword will devour flesh, the blood of the slaughtered and the captives and the heads of the enemy leaders. Rejoice with him, you heavens, and let all the God's angels worship him. Rejoice with all his people, you Gentiles, and let all the angels be strengthened in him. For he will avenge the blood of his children, and he will take revenge against his enemies. He will repay those who hate him and cleanse his people's land. Wow. It's quite a song. It's a promise that God will not allow the land that he created for good to be perverted forever. So Moses came with Joshua, son of Nun, and recited all these words of this song to his people. And when Moses finished reciting all these words to the people of Israel, he added, take to heart all the words of warning I have given you today. Pass them on as a command to your children, so they will obey every word of these instructions. These instructions are not empty words. They are your life. By obeying them, you will enjoy a long life in the land you will occupy when you cross the Jordan River. That same day, the Lord said to Moses, go to Moab, to the mountains east of the river, and climb Mount Nebo, which is across from Jericho. Look out across the land of Canaan, the land I'm giving to the people of Israel as their special possession. Then you will die there on the mountain. You will join your ancestors, just as Aaron your brother died on Mount Hor and joined his ancestors. For both of you betrayed me with the Israelites at the waters of Meribah, at Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin. You failed to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel there. So you will see the land at a distance, but you may not enter the land I'm giving to the people of Israel. And my note there is, the calling to be a leader of God's people is a high one. And I wonder how often I fail to demonstrate God's holiness to the people he has called me to serve. I don't know. But I do know that the whole focus of what we do is meant to give glory to God. And I hope we do that together well. And so we will pick up next week with Moses' final blessing to his people. Let me see if I can figure this out.